There's quite a lot of hot water about in this week's podcast. Anas Sarwar got into plenty when he was doorstepped trying to explain the commitments that Labour made to save Grangemouth during the election campaign, which have all but totally dematerialised. The SNP looks like it could be in a bit of that with the sudden decision by Audrey Nicholl to step down as an MSP. That's the woman who is in a seat that Stephen Flynn had targeted at one point. Kind of just looks a bit odd and not much of a good explanation yet. And maybe Pat and myself are in deep water because we both back a Tory MSP. Liz Smith, who wants residential outdoor centres for every school kid for at least a week during their school career. Sounds like a humble enough plea, but it just isn't getting the support it needs. Those are the headlines. Now for the podcast.
Hi chums and welcome to this week's Lesley podcast. And LaBelle Ridder is hot foot but cold-tatted back home after a trip down to London. Yes, knee heating on while you were out.
Rookie the heating just clicked itself off actually. I mean, it's not, it's 6 degrees, so I mean it's it's kind of, it's actually 6 degrees outside, so at least there's a certain consistency there. But no, I was chumming. My stepdaughter was in for yucky she was getting impacted wisdom teeth out, which is a surgical thing. And, 2 hours supposedly, with people actually drilling into your head. So, I mean, when she described, I thought, God almighty, I'm not letting her go through that on her own. And actually, as it turned out, she was in for 15 minutes.
Whoosh.
I have never seen anything like it. I mean, the expertise of the dentist was like, the dentist spent longer explaining all the kind of outcomes and how her jaw was arranged and did a sort of, x-ray and things like that. And I mean, I'm touching wood here, but she walked out the other side and we hopped off to see, her sister, mother, stepdaughter, as if nothing had happened.
Blimey.
And it's like, it just is not possible. I mean, this is what being young and fit does for you, I think, actually. So anyway, happy days. But yeah, I've just cantered back up the road. So I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, well, just in a wee addition to that, because I had a couple of wisdom teeth taken out about 6 years ago, and being at my age, after it, I walked straight past my brother and staggered out into the street, and he was there to give me a lift home. So yeah, that was it. That's the difference. Didn't know whether it was Tuesday or Christmas.
Well, you definitely get a whole variety. I mean, another person, and because people were telling me this, and I was obviously not filtering very heavily what stories got passed on. Mm-hmm. But somebody basically said they felt like their stomach had been sort of like it was all connected down to their muscles in their stomach. I thought, God, okay, I don't think that one's going anywhere. So anyway, if anyone's waiting for that procedure, it actually. It seems to be, and two friends of mine said it was a relative doddle. You put your earphones on, you don't under any circumstances open your eyes. Mm-hmm. There was a point where I was sitting at the tail end of her, sort of in the chair, because they were being very sort of, mum type people can come in and, if you need to hold hands. She's pretty hardy actually, so she didn't really need that. But on the other hand, I didn't want to look like I was abandoning her. So she'd popped out of the loo just before they got wired in. And I said to them, do the mum type people sort of usually sit here? And they said, under no circumstances at all. She said, this will be a sight you will never forget because you'll see it. She won't, So I said, okay, bye. Right. So anyway, there we are.
Oh, they just said, so we addendum to that. I don't know if I've ever told you this story before. When I went in to get my two done, I sat down and I noticed a technician struggling with a video camera. And I said, what's up? He says, well, I'm going to get you to sign a form because what we want to do is record this procedure so we can use it with students. And this is going to be particularly opposite what he's going to do and the equipment the prof is going to use to demonstrate to students. I says, oh, that's interesting. I signed the form. And the guy spent about 5 minutes. He couldn't get it set up. I said, look, I use that camera all the time. Do you want me to set it up for you? So the bizarre thing was the prof sat in the chair being me. I rigged up the video camera, which then recorded the whole process of me getting two wisdom teeth out. So there you go. That was anyway, it was.
You realise nobody will remember anything else we talk about now. It'll just be wisdom teeth. Yeah.
Ta-da, that's it.
Although, and actually, right, this is really the final one. There was a book I was reading, and now I've forgotten who, usual thing, called Breath. Suddenly forgotten. James. It's nearly there. it's kind of, a lot of people have been reading this about how we don't nose breathe enough and how our jaws have changed over time because we also don't chew enough. So the post-industrial mouth or person is basically eating relative sludge compared to the really hard chewing we used to do. Before the industrial age, everybody was chewing for about an hour minimum every day, which kept jaws really healthy and sort of wide. So James Nestor, his theory is our jaws, it's not even a theory, I think it's pretty proven really, our jaws have just slumped and got sort of smaller. So that's why there's this epidemic of people with braces and kind of, wisdom teeth problem and everything like that. So anyone who really knows what they're talking about, in contrast to myself, right, if you do feel you want to kind of, go, that is utter horse procedures and so on, you just feel free, right? In fact, we should just say it's hello@lesleyriddick.com if you ever feel you want to come back at something. I think there is someone who has done just that thing. I don't
absolutely.
know if you... Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
At whatever point you feel you want to come back. And the other thing we always forget to do is to say thank you to subscribers.
Yes.
God, we really, really appreciate it. And here we are 2 months into the new year and haven't said a dicky bird. So, right. So there we are.
Couple of things there on the statement that mastication is definitely good for you. And talking of subscribers, we've got an extra coming up very shortly with Matthew Zajac.
Zajac.
Sorry,
I just have known him so long.
Yeah. With Matthew Zajac on his production of The Testament of Gideon Mack, which is touring the play around Scotland. But yes, I mean, what it proves actually with hello@lesleyriddick.com is that we've got an informed and engaged set of listeners, because after the piece I did 2 weeks ago on Grangemouth and the potential as identified by Unite the Union for sustainable aviation fuel, Simon Brooke got in touch with us with some facts and figures that he'd researched about the difficulties of introducing biofuels, particularly those based on foodstuffs, for the replacement of aviation fuel for the aviation industry. After my little piece last week, Stephen Gregg took me to task, very interestingly, on my response to Simon Brooke. And as Stephen himself said, the sustainable aviation fuel is hardly a panacea, for this just transition and the complete replacement of kerosene within the expanding aviation fuel. What I did was I took that really on board, and particularly what he did is he mentioned SATE, the Sustainable Aviation Test Environment, part of the UK's Future Flight initiative. Is based in Kirkwall in Orkney, and what it's doing is it's examining alternative means of alternative aviation in terms of hybrid electric, etc. What you also identified was Andrew Tate at UHI, and he said a tremendous resource there. And what I felt about that is that, what I do a lot of the time is that I did do actually research on this and looked at the facts and figures and tried to condense it down. And of course, within the framework of a short podcast, I know an hour seems a long time, but in the framework of a short podcast, it's difficult to get the nuances and difficulties and risks and advantages over in that time. And I think that sustainable aviation fuel and the work of the SATE were probably worth a more in-depth one. And I'm going to go out and investigate whether we should actually do a podcast extra on that, because it is a complex and complicated area. But I will stick to the fact that one of the aspects was, as Stephen said himself, is biofuels are not the panacea, and even the industry's own estimations of I think by the 2030s to have 5% of jet fuel be through sustainable aviation fuel. And I think they've currently met up to the latest figures 0.16% of that. But I do think in terms of the discussion of SATE, the impact on rural communities, and the work of Andrew Tate, it might be worth another investigation. But thanks very much to Stephen for getting in touch. I never ever object to anybody telling me things I don't know, because I also usually say to my students, you could paper the walls of this classroom with postage stamps and it still would not cover the amount of things I do not know, but I do try to understand. So, but thank you for getting in touch, Stephen. It was appreciated, and it's one I've definitely taken on board. So, yeah. So,
sorry,
but
on you go.
Yeah, but sustainable aviation fuel. Wow, that kind of leads us into it's been a hell of a week for the Labour Party, hasn't it? I mean, both at UK level, with what's going on with the National Crime Agency raids and videos and the claims that they're aping reform, and blimey O'Reilly, didn't Colin Mackay catch Anas Sarwar, a bonny one, with that doorstep interview at Holyrood, where he actually took him to task completely, for the first time I've ever seen, on the pre-election claims that Sarwar made about the Labour Party, if it won the election, would protect the jobs of Grangemouth workers and invest hundreds of millions of pounds, which had been agreed by the UK Labour government, in saving the jobs and saving Grangemouth.
Well, here you catch me on the moment that I have basically been not paying attention, right? I'd noticed people kind of tweeting and saying, hey, this is telling the BBC how to do it. But did he actually just do that, doorstep Anas Sarwar?
Yes, he just walked up to him when he was coming out of the chamber.
Yeah, that's a good one, because what very often happens just is, you can see this, that the Labour Party just put their heads down, quite obviously won't respond to, polite requests to come on programmes. And that's usually as far as the Beeb get. They'll say, we contacted someone from the Labour Party, no one was available. I mean, to be fair, that can often happen with the Scottish Government too. But to actually, the art of the doorstep is not dead then. And there's no question Colin Mackay is your boy when it comes to just being very sort of in your face about stuff, which is just what's needed with this. But yeah, it is. Any attempt, there's no way. I noted, I was watching either Debate Night, I think it was, and there was, and again, a Labour person trying to square the circle on that. It's just not possible. And people get so angry when they hear this now, because I think the thing is, each time you hear some, bullshit, let's be frank about it, about, like now about Grangemouth, it then builds on the bullshit you've heard about everything else. So, we don't even need to add to the list. It's like that song. What's that song you used to sing where you add another verse on each time you repeat it, and then the chorus, and then there's another one? It's like that. We're now getting to a stage where almost everything that seems significant promises, particular specific promises, seems to be serially broken. So. And the Grangemouth thing, it is a shocking situation. I was listening also actually to Radio Scotland, who had Michelle Thompson on, and your favourite Labour MP, Brian Leishman. And Brian Leishman is pretty jaw-dropping, actually. I mean, I just can't see how he's going to be in the Labour Party for much longer, because there's no sides to him at all. And I mean, I think it's funny how and this would be the point, is that, when you actually are really as honest as that guy, Martin Geisler was interviewing him, and he sort of almost seemed to run out of road a bit, because he's so used to hiking stuff out of people. I mean, this guy just went, yeah, I do disagree with the leadership on this completely. It was like, right, okay. But, is he in the right party? What other party can there be? I mean, anyway, Michelle Thompson, though, also very critical and standing down. So this one could yet be there could be a big thing in it for every political party. But Labour, it just fits into a sort of scenario that's just getting worse and worse for them.
Yeah, I mean, when I watched the interview, what Sarwar went back on, he kept talking about positive, and he's thinking positive about what said Colin Mackay, and he reiterated entirely, it's a private company. I do not own Grangemouth. It's a private company, which again reveals the fact, because Brian Leishman, and I retract everything I said, possibly being slightly sceptical about Brian Leishman 3 or 4 weeks ago, he would not have stuck to his guns if it was a purely personal, let's protect myself at all costs narrative he was promulgating, because he's put himself right out on a limb, totally at odds with the UK and the Scottish Labour Party on this, because Brian Leishman favours nationalisation, ownership and public control, whereas Sarwar cannot say that, because that would be out of line with the general thrust of what the UK Labour Party is doing. And what Sarwar also did was he said, well, we've only been in government for 6 months. Well, as if you haven't been preparing for government for umpteen years when you were in the lead. And he laid the blame entirely on inaction by both the Conservatives and the SNP over that time period. And it's that whole thing of the, people say, oh, well, it's the SNP, it's the Scots whinging about we've got devolved powers, but these powers lie at Westminster. That is the reality within the framework of the devolved settlement. The SNP cannot do things within the framework of the devolved administration that the UK government can do. And yes, we were tied to a Conservative government, but that abject set, and Colin Mackay was very clear. Did you lie to the Scottish government, the Scottish people? Did you lie? And he was very straightforward on this. But the kicker at the end of it was, after I don't own Grangemouth, and I thought there, you don't even own your own promises or pledges. He said that what they were going to do is GB Energy would kick in, GB Energy, and he would end the ideological block to nuclear energy. This was going to be the saviour. Nuclear energy, not for the workers currently now though, but nuclear energy was going to be the saviour of the green transition.
Yeah, this actually makes me blow a gasket. I get so angry about this. I'm just going to put this right up front here, because the future of Scotland is to manage to harness all the renewable energy sources which do make us the Saudi Arabia of renewables. Tidal, wave, hydrogen, pump hydro, solar, even. Dundee, the sunniest city practically in Britain, weirdly enough, but not today. As well as wind and all the others. People have got all their stuff. Oh, but you can't, you can have as much wind as you want, but it doesn't produce the kind of immediate flick of a switch baseload power that you need to replace gas. That's true. But all those others, hydro, tidal, totally does. And that every time there's a kind of, we can just have a quick sprint to nuclear thing goes on, research and tidal stops, and it doesn't get to the critical mass needed to be able to be the big part of the energy mix that we need, because all the money starts trotting off elsewhere. And the nuclear thing is just unbelievable. I was reading a really interesting piece by Pat Kane. I was going to say Pat Joyce.
That'd be a first.
That just would be a fine thing if you were back in the writing mode, my dear. But it was a really interesting piece written about this, which was looking at the where we've got to with nuclear, which is actually just reprising something I've said. Everything about it, it's more expensive than every form of nuclear, of renewables. It takes longer to build, hence all, this, we're not having any more planning objections. Every power station, like Hinkley C, is a decade late, wildly over budget, wouldn't come into service. And this was written right 3 years ago till 2027, even if the British government could find new investors to ease out the Chinese state-backed group CGN, oops, which were like, that was fine. Why did the City of London not invest in Hinkley C or Sizewell? If it's such a great bet, why is our own money not going into these things? Because it wasn't Sizewell C, and we're apparently waiting for Rachel Reeves to give it its go-ahead. Geez, this thing has been sitting here almost it feels like as long as we've been alive, but that's a slight exaggeration. But if that gets built, it wouldn't produce electricity till the 2030s. The average nuclear plant takes 18 years in planning and construction, all of that. And the thing is, it's not just here, because there's a German institute that looked at this, examined 674 nuclear power plants built across the world since 1951. And so this is now well beyond us and all the namby-pamby people who are interested in newts and grass and stuff like that, Keir Starmer's going to blame. So across the world, the average plant made a loss of 4.8 billion euros. And, the professor of the history of science at Harvard was writing that the most recent power reactors were started in 2013. This was written 2 years ago. They are still not finished. So that's like written 10 years after, that's 10 years and those plants haven't been finished. And she says that's the problem with imagined breakthrough technologies. The breakthrough can be sudden, but the implementation is necessarily slow. And that's a very, this is quite apart from all the worries about radioactive contamination. There's been no progress about how to store or get rid of, and of course we've been on the tail end of that for just so long. Then there's these small modular reactors, which is the latest thing everyone's on about. Apparently Rolls-Royce says these small reactors can be constructed cheaply in a factory, transported in modules, fitted together, quote, like Meccano, unquote. But at the moment, I think it's still true to say the world's only small modular reactor is in Russia. Hitachi had a high-profile project in Wales. Toshiba had one in Cumbria. Both have been mothballed because of a financing problem 3 years ago, which prompted the Tories to put through a nuclear energy financing bill to basically allow them to just throw wads of cash to be able to make this work. And Labour, in opposition, backed them to the hilt. And, I mean, there was a suggestion at the time, because I just thought, what is this about? Because this is not cheaper. The subsidy that's given to nuclear is more and is higher. And the length that they've got 35-year contract with a higher strike rate for the production, the energy they produce, than any other form of energy. And if all of that money was put into developing renewables, we would be just sitting a lot prettier. We would. So what the heck is Labour's thing about nuclear? And I noted at the time that the head of the Unite Union said Labour's perceived ambivalence towards nuclear has been a factor in losing seats like Workington, Barrow-in-Furness and Hartlepool, because here's the workforces that think Labour, just let them down. I don't know if it's because crap as that, really, but or it's just one of these white heats of technology thing. We're both old enough to remember, Harold Wilson's kind of, we're going to get going kind of stuff. But I mean, in Scotland, it makes no sense whatsoever. And I'm pretty glad that they, although there's been a lot of speculation about the SNP caving in on this, I hope, though, that they spell out why. It's not like we're doing an arm wrestling thing and, the English kind of say, oh, nuclear is fabadabadozy. And we go, no, just because you're we're freaking not doing it. Yeah. It's very good reasons not to do it. And just please, I hope somebody spell that out.
Yeah, I mean, I knew at the moment I saw Anas Sarwar say it, I thought, I've got to ask Lesley about it, because I know you're not only passionate, but incredibly well informed about it. I mean, it is. And it is that whole, for the life of me, I cannot, other than securing the support of the continued support of the GMB, who are very, very pro nuclear energy, and that potential of losing seats because of perceived green anti-nuclear perspective in these Labour held seats. I cannot see what's behind it. What is the antipathy towards investing that level of money in sustainable energy? I really don't. I genuinely don't get it.
I know. Yeah. The other thing, though, I think what it is this is a lot of private cash that's going to go in. Yeah. This can look like there's something happening without the government having to put a penny into it, other than, well, it looks like actually there is some thought that Rachel Reeves will actually put a lot of public money into it, that she will, that she'll support 10,000 jobs. And here we are, stimulate £4 billion worth of investment. Stimulate, right? So that's not their money. But the thing, and so this also relates to, you may remember, I kind of also get quite exercised about the Severn Tidal Barrage, in that is unbelievable that is, it's the second biggest tidal range in the world. And if you could harness that, it could generate 7% of the UK's total energy needs. And yet, when I looked at this a couple of years ago, there had been 15 attempts to do this in the past 200 years, none of which were successful. And according to the leader of Cardiff Council, they said the UK government has not lent its support due to a perceived requirement for high levels of public investment. So here we are again. It's like, there's a lot of talk, and we've done this before, about various things about patient capital and about the need for certain sorts of private investment. But I mean, a barrage, something like that's like a tidal barrage like that, is pretty, I mean, you'd think that's pretty much safe as houses. We're never going to not need energy. So anyway, right now, there is actually a commission that's been set up in November of last year to to look at, I mean, here we are again. So how many attempts did I say just there? Now was it 15 over 200 years?
Mm-hmm.
So 16 over 200 years is now this independent commission looking at the potential for tidal renewables in the Severn Estuary, which is like, this is like a cut and paste from anything that's been going for the last 10 years with a 6-figure funding contribution from the Crown Estate. 6 figures. Lordy, yeah. Right? You got to remember, a half a mile of motorway is apparently 5 million quid. 6 figures? What's that? A foot?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, well, added to the fact, I don't know if you noticed that Shell, BP, et al., involved in oil and gas extraction, are all cutting back on their development of green technologies because their profits have fallen. So there you go. That's the old typical cartoon of the sitting in the cave. We did destroy the planet, but for a decade we increased the return on profit to our shareholders and investors. So I mean, it's a horrible kind of thing, and it just seems to me anti-economic sense as well as anti-social sense. But again, Anas Sarwar, the other thing he's done this week, and I find this an interesting one that's been going on, is that while Anas Sarwar seems to be stealing the SNP's clothes by saying that a future Labour government will protect the benefits of devolution. The benefits of devolution, and I say that heavily, are the baby box, no tuition fees, free prescriptions, mitigation of the bedroom tax. Yeah, you got it. These are not the benefits of devolution. These are benefits of the decisions that the Scottish Government, the SNP Scottish Government, have taken over the past times that they've been in government. So what you've actually got there is, while Anas Sarwar here up in Scotland is aping the SNP, and hoping that people will not vote SNP for SNP policies, but will vote Labour for SNP policies. Down south, it looks as if the UK Labour Party are taking on the clothing and the mantle and aping Reform UK over matters such as immigration, and hoping that will convince people not to vote Reform, which is the full fat version, but will vote Labour.
And there's the thing, not to vote Reform. That is like, don't think of a white elephant,
So,
and actually, I did notice in one fleeting moment as I was racing around the place, a little bit clip from the news with Nigel Farage being asked by Gary Gibbons from Channel 4, what did he think about, Starmer having come out and done all this? Was this walking up his, and Farage basically said, this is just what we want, Just you come onto our turf, look nervous, start talking about immigration. And he even said he thought there was a 1 in 3 chance he would be in number 10.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's where this is all going. But, something else that strikes me, though, about both Sarwar, actually the whole of the Labour Party, is that they talk like Daleks. I mean, they talk like... I mean, most politicians are really boring speakers, actually, and increasingly so these days, you'd have to say. But there's something, you can see that everybody who's being fielded by Labour is just being put out there to just absolutely bullshit. And it's kind of crucifyingly boring and annoying listening to people who are just clearly just trying to do, they're just trying to get through an entire sentence. It's like some sort of weird version of Just a Minute where you win the game if you don't use any proper nouns. So you actually manage to say nothing for an entire minute. And then it goes on for 5. But I think the thing is, in the sense that the Scots have always been a pretty tough audience, it just really, really annoys people here. They expect a bit of something, a bit of humour, a bit of, which, I mean, I think that's where Anas with his, heavy jokes about being a dentist once and, extracting the truth and all that. No, you see, that doesn't work. That's not really belly laugh funny enough. And this kind of, just this sort of just leaping around and just trying to, not answer a question, but to bullshit up about how growth is great and this and that. It doesn't work here. It really doesn't work. I mean, you could say, well, it did because they won the election, but then that was a promise. It's just now that you're kind of, where's the beef moment has come. It just draws attention to the sort of hollowness of the whole project. I mean, what are they actually up for, really? Because it feels like it's just finding forms of words every time to just get through this interview, then get through another one and another one. And, at some point, you've got to come out running with what you actually believe in. The advantage the SNP will always have is they believe in independence. Now, so a lot of people say, well, not enough to do, whatever, but they do. We know that's what their aim is. What is the aim of Labour now?
Oh, to stay in power. That's it. That's as far as I can identify.
And you could say, the SNP might be just the same.
Yeah.
But we have spent in that the Scots have been changed by the effect of having had an SNP government for 17 years. They're used to people in power who've got a kind of larger picture kind of going on as to where they're aiming at. And by contrast, Anas Sarwar just sounds like a guy who is just going out for the messages over and over and over again, and it's not enough to be a contrast. It needs something larger and more ambitious. And of course it can't, because then it whacks up against London Labour, but also even against the style of that, which is very sort of dozy boy kind of. I mean, I went, weirdly enough, after Jenny'd had her, this kind of procedure yesterday, boy, did she recover quickly and she dragged me out to a comedy club. So I was at a comedy club in London last night with her, and everybody was taking the piss out of, Keir Starmer. I mean, my God, it was endless, basically. Just the woodenness of him and doing impersonations of him and stuff. And so that's not okay. If that's who's leading off, if that style and that, that complete absence of, liveliness and humanity and all that stuff, if that's the kind of litmus paper from which Anas Sarwar draws his kind of shape, then that will just bomb here.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I think it will. I mean, and I'll just wonder how long the Labour Party in Scotland will tolerate Anas Sarwar as leader. I'm just throwing it out there because, I mean, unless he's actually sitting down to a set-up interview where he sits comfortably and it's pre-recorded and it can be put out, and there are what appears to me to be underhand bowling going on. He doesn't handle it at all well. And as I say, Colin Mackay caught him out bonny on stuff that he'd said before. And talking about Daleks, I don't know if you've seen the video of Yvette Cooper standing in front of the Union flag, which I noted was artfully placed. I mean, is there a Labour Party policy? Doesn't it appear in front of the Union flag these days when making a statement? Artfully placed, so it just looked like the cross of St. George, with the tiniest element of blue at the top and the bottom. And the whole acceptance seems to be from this movement to what's called Blue Labour is that the British people want lower immigration. And there's no analysis of why they want lower immigration, what problems they think stopping immigration is going to solve at all. And I was absolutely sickened, to be perfectly frank, by the adverts that the Labour Party have put out, which are in the colours of reform, and in particular by the video shot by the Home Office and the National Crime Agency. I mean, where you see helmeted black-clothed officers at night with barking dogs raiding people's homes who are illegal immigrants, and then rounding them up. And listening to Yvette Cooper, it was, Hostile Environment 2, the remake. Welcome back to that. And as we've seen from right across Europe, and the lesson that should be taken, and Diane Abbott said this, the lesson that should be taken is, if you take on board the policies of the right, it doesn't benefit you, it legitimizes that right-wing party to get the votes. And as I said, they'll vote for the full fat version. So it ain't going to work. And rather than tackling the causes, which are unemployment, lack of housing, was in the framework of understanding that to many people, they will see X coming in and they make that judgment. And it's easy for me as a middle-class person within that framework, because job has never been threatened by undercutting payments or perceived to be threatened by someone coming to this country. It's easy for me to say that, but that's the hard job that politicians ought to bloody well do. That's their job. And the Labour Party, I don't think, believes in it. They'll be prepared to go with the flow, go with the zeitgeist. And that will not do the country well, nor will it do the Labour Party well.
Yep, amen to that. We're going to have to find something to disagree about, Pat.
Yeah. Oh, well, yes. But before we put the boot into the Labour Party, there was a surprise further on other matters. But I was stunned to read the headline, "I support Liz Smith." In the National. I thought, so there you go, folks. We put the boot into the Labour Party. We're a right pair of socialists we are. Well, yeah. And then you've Lesley turning around and saying, "I support Liz Smith."
Who is a Tory MSP for the millions of you who'll be going, who the heck she, you know?
Yeah.
Well, of course, it was a sort of first sentence designed to get some attention, which it seemed to have done. But yeah. because if you were to say this is a piece about the importance of outdoor education, see, you're gone already, haven't you? Right. So, and so nonetheless, Liz Smith has got a sort of her own kind of private members bill together where she wants every kid to have essentially the right to a week's residential outdoor centres during their school career at some point. It doesn't mean it's compulsory, but the option to do it will be mandatory. And so the funding would have to be there for that to work. Now, she is, she's a Tory, but she, if you talk to a lot of people, she's very often the only Tory that a lot of the rest of the, SNP MSPs or anybody even vaguely raise. She was a teacher before she became an MSP. She's actually played cricket for the Scottish women's team. Was the oldest, I think, kind of at one of the what's the events that the cricket kind of one day events. Anyway, she was a one-day internationalist, and I think the oldest competitor in that, which is not to sort of take any jibes around there, but she's dogged. She also has climbed every Munro over a period of 30 years and raised money for charity while she was doing it. Now, okay, a lot of people go, just don't break my heart. She still voted for, the one-child cap and blah, all of that stuff. And fair enough, yes. But this is what she's decided to come up with, and I think she's completely right. This, of course, I've got the whole huts thing, and all the background of that is I've personally got a huge interest in the indoorsness of Scots, and how unaware we are of how weird and damaging it is, and how absolutely unique we are at our latitude to be spending so much time indoors because we have no shelter, essentially. Once you're kind of outside, you're off your own turf, you're on some landowner's land, there's no creature comforts, and you don't expect any. So you've got to be as hardy as anything to be an outdoors person in Scotland. And that lets Scottish kids miss so much. A lot of people will think, but what about right to roam legislation, which actually went through 20 years ago precisely this month even. But we're not talking about a glorified day trip or something. We're talking about the right to stay somewhere, to relax, to have fun. And those of you who might have watched the Denmark film would see that, 15-year-olds there get the ability to spend a year away from home with other 15-year-olds, very largely doing outdoors-based stuff, but just away from home, growing up, learning to, all this stuff. So it's the mixture of the residential thing is that you get the chance to go away and be with other kids in a different, non-governed by your home environment way, and to be outdoors doing stuff because it brings so many skills to bear and so much kind of camaraderie or learning in a different kind of way for a lot of kids who don't feel so academic. And even those, I think both of us included, who were fairly academic but just totally loved it. Yeah. So when I talk to, what happened to us, because apparently the Scots used to be thought of as the big outdoor educationists in Britain anyway, which is usually behind the curve on everything, relatively speaking, across Europe. But it seems that, we have lost a slot, and there's a whole lot of different ideas of what basically happened. But, the 70s and 80s was considered the heyday of outdoor educational provision in Scotland. Youth hosteling figures reached record numbers in 1976. And in 1982, the Countryside Commission for Scotland said that doing these kind of residential outdoor gigs was viewed as an integral part of teaching geography, biology and history. Local authorities bought and converted mansion houses, a lot of them. And then, now what? Liz Smith said she thought it was the teacher strikes of the 1980s, 1984 to 1986. and that many councils lost their dedicated outdoor education staff at that point, and sort of is blaming the teachers. You can go back, and doubtless you were there. That it was Thatcher trying to cut teachers' pay that prompted that fucking dispute. So so there's a thought. There many more people say that actually it was to do with local government reorganisation, when big councils like Strathclyde were the ones that had huge outdoor centre network. But then that was to allow them to have a commitment that every kid within their reach would be able to go to one. So that would mean kids in inner city Glasgow would be able to go out to somewhere near Tannabruach or somewhere out, closer out to, on the water or whatever, so that the fact that they connected both inner city environments and rural ones meant that they had the ideal kind of mix to let them have a really big outdoor centre network. As soon as the Tories, once again, were the ones who kiboshed that two-tier system of local government. When that happened, lots of smaller councils were left with far more centres than their own local populations could justify. That was more the kind of rural, West Coast rural ones. And then it seems like COVID was probably the tin lid for a lot of places that just got mothballed for years and then just quietly closed in the meantime. So we've got a situation where there was, the number of outdoor education centres has halved between 1982 and sort of just about now. And back then, 60% were run by councils. Now it's just 17%, which is not, a lot of charities are doing a great job. But, come on. What do we want to do? And I know there's tough choices, except there's been a bit more money put into the kitty again. But that just means places like Arran, for example, that I kind of have visited myself, a brilliant outdoor centre there. That one just hops from year to year, sort of just facing closure because it looks like the luxury extra for North Ayrshire Council. And every year at the last minute, there's a reprieve because there's been a bit more money put into the system for council funding. But, we're sitting here at the same day that Liz launched her thing. There was a piece that people will have heard about the Centre for Mental Health estimating that 1 in 5 children in England, it won't be different here, 1 in 5 has a diagnosable mental health problem. And that over their lifetimes, that will likely lead to 1 trillion in lost earnings, since that's all that seems to matter, is how it turns into money. But it does do that. And sort of, it's so proven that outdoor stuff and all the things we're describing, reach the parts that other things just do not reach. More curriculum, more learning. It doesn't do the business. So Liz Smith, all part of your elbow. And I hope that the SNP members on the committee do support this. I haven't had the chance to check it because I've been running around too much. I have a suspicion that in the last vote on this, they didn't.
Right. It does seem, I've got to speak up for this because, I was a Belmont boy. My mother was a primary school teacher. So I went to Belmont, primary 5, primary 6, primary 7, because my mum was one of the teachers who actually taught at Belmont, during that.
You need to say what that is.
Oh, Belmont was an outdoor camp set up specifically for, and I'm not sure if it was entirely just for what was Dundee Corporation at that time, but it was Dundee Corporation, so it was the city of Dundee fundamentally. But so I don't know if Perth or all the other.
Oh no, they were in it because actually what it was there was a national government in 1939 of all parties. Yeah. Although Tory Prime Minister, and they passed actually a couple of useful acts, one of which was the Camps Act that established 25 outdoor education camps, England and Wales, 5 in Scotland, and actually was a slightly bigger whack rate than, pro rata. So those were supposed to cater for pretty much, kind of everybody really in the Central Belt. And then over the years, they became charities. 5 became 3. So there's Belmont, and I wish I'd got the list of them here. There's another one down somewhere in West Lothian. Anyway, so there's only 3. And the trouble for Belmont, because I've often walked around there, it's near Meagle and sort of or whatever it is, Perth, Angus, something. And it's quite often looks a bit eerie and kind of empty. And the difficulty with that is its occupancy rate at the moment is 25 to 30%.
Yeah.
And sort of this is how this will close, unless something like the statutory right would be game changing, according to the guys who are the managers of this, because it would, just put enough kids through it for them to actually do repairs that these camps have been built 80 years ago. And there's a lot of stuff that needs, it was one of these vicious circles, really. They need a bit of, they're not going to become luxury modules or anything, but the stuff needs doing. And we need to change our approach to this. We're so punitive, about being a young person. It's like, and just life, we're kind of giving ourselves convenience that basically causes us all sorts of dietary and physical problems. It's not what we need. We need to be able to get out into the land that we have and enjoy ourselves together, as families, or as many different ways as you can have groups, whether it's, Baidian folk, kids playing together, or just total randoms being out able to go off somewhere together, or a whole class going somewhere and meeting a whole class from somewhere else. That's what, that's what youth's about. It's all the beautiful experience of just how much there is in the world and how many different ways there are for you to find someone that you get on with.
Yes.
And you can't substitute that. If you don't have that, you become a grim kind of person so easily. Life just looks like a long series of grim Anas Sarwar interviews, and it just has to be better than that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know every single kid, and I went to school at covered the Hilltown area in Dundee. Everybody went because you didn't have to put your hand in your pocket to do that. Everybody went, and then subsequent to that, when I was in the school, the Dundee Schools Orchestra, we got sent to Aberfoyle for free, for a week at a time to actually learn our instruments. But we're in Belmont. Everything revolved around being outside, playing sports, walks, nature study. It was great fun, and as I say, everybody went. And then again at secondary school, I was very lucky, and again I didn't have to put my hand in my pocket. We would go the 5th and 6th year, we went up to Aviemore to go hill walking and doing things like that. We also got involved in the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme. You can say what you like about it, but it got us outdoors. Yeah. We did the expeditions. We worked in. I worked with kids with Down syndrome. I worked with the fire and rescue service, and it was really tremendously interesting. What it led on to as well, when I got older, was that in 5th, 6th and year at school and 1st year at university, I worked on the River Amond project, which was clearing out the River Amond, and it's still to this day. It was done by students from all around Europe working together, from as far away as Yugoslavia, France, Germany, Italy, Scotland, England. It was brilliant. I met loads of folk, went to see them in their own countries, and built up relationships and learned to get along with people from different backgrounds and learn what we had in common and enjoy the differences. And it's just so galling to see politicians, many of whom grew up in an era where all this was provided to them by the state, pulling the ladder up and not letting it happen. And I make a plea, there is nothing better than being with your pals and other people out in the open air playing. And let's hope that, and I support Liz on this as well. I really do. I think yes.
Actually, I'll say this for her, actually, because I did phone her to just check a few, facts and figures with her, and she sent me a really nice email later when she read the column saying that was a lovely article in the National. And I thought, God Almighty, you could frame my headline, but you could also frame her response. So. Anyway, we'll wait to see what's happening. I had a quick look and I can't see the progress on it. It should be going through to a committee stage, but and I hope that the SNP have not had a thing where they've just been told this is not our headline expenditure, you cannot support this, and we're giving you the line, because I have a horrible feeling that may have happened.
Yeah,
please correct me, folks, if you know otherwise.
Yeah. And I just say it was cross-party, as you've identified, way back in the day, as far as 1939, you know. The only thing to look forward to is the past, as whatever happened to the likely lads. But talking about MSPs, I see that Audrey Nicholl has decided to stand aside. And for those of you who have got a good memory, this was the MSP who was apparently under pressure to step aside to allow Stephen Flynn to come back to Holyrood in 2026.
This is a weird one. I mean, everyone will, by the time they hear this was sometime last week, actually, so they'll know that this strange kind of announcement happened. When you look at it, because obviously you think, that's a strange one. And also, why, And I mean, we've both had a wee look through. I can't see anybody managing to get in her statement. She doesn't say why. She does the usual thing about the honour of blah, blah, and, whatever. But there's no explanation of a sudden about turn when she was, quite determined to stay in her position. And actually, there was a thing that happened just in the tail end of last year when her husband, who was also in the SNP, quit the party. This was kind of in November, just thereby. He quit the party over the controversial bus gates in Aberdeen. Now, either you don't know what this is about, or you'll go, I've got a 60 quid fine too, right? Because it is, again, maddening. I was there. You don't. It's a strange city. You don't know where you're going, and suddenly you've gone through a bus gate, and a 60 quid fine appears. Many people in Glasgow will know this because there's a wee one, I can't remember the name of the square, but there's one again that you suddenly find yourself, oh my God, there's nowhere else you can go, and suddenly bang, you're gone through. You see, when you get the idea of the words bus gate, you expect some massive thing that's got, a huge do not enter and, the shape of a bus and, a big cross across everything. It isn't. It's just like you pony along and just suddenly bang, you've gone through it. Now, there's been a lot of kind of controversy about that on the council, very, very heated, because I think, the council has really stuck to its guns on this. Although, again, if I have a bit more time to check, I think just very recently there might have been a rethink. However, in November there wasn't. And so Audrey Nicholl is married to Alex Nicholl. And so he was a councillor, and he decided to quit the party even over this because he was so furious. He had also said publicly he'd lost confidence in the current SNP council co-leader. So that's a bit of a kind of, that's quite a thing to say. Now, interestingly, somebody on the P&J, the Press and Journal local paper, went to Audrey Nicholl and said, is that a kind of awkward thing for you that he's off-ski? Because obviously you're an SNP, MSP. And she said, at the time, there's no awkwardness in this. I'm absolutely immersed in what I'm doing. Now, remember, this is November. I've got a really important role in the Parliament, convening a busy committee. And in terms of the constituency, big issues going on, not least of all RAC, which is, a big one in 600 homes there. If it does mean any difference for me, then it wouldn't be through my choice. It's a strange kind of way of putting things. But anyway, so she, as recently as November, she thought she had an important role in the Parliament and wasn't kind of seeing any connection with whatever happened with her husband, which, let's face it, two individuals, so, it does all kind of make people think, has she been kind of lent on? And then there's a story running at the moment, actually on a number of papers. I think the Scottish Sun were the ones that sort of broke it potentially, but it's running as an exclusive on the National, which is Stephen Flynn is running a boys' brigade in Westminster, with the suggestion that there's a list of women MSPs that could usefully be ousted before the Holyrood election. If that's, I mean, I don't think the National would likely print something like that. And I see that there's 3 reporters' bylines on this. So, I think there's been there would have been a fair amount of some kind of checking, at least with sources, But that's not going to be a great look. And it's right now, I'm sure a lot of people will think Audrey Nicholl was just told to go. I mean, it's the only conclusion you could kind of reasonably come to. So whether Stephen Flynn's going to hop into that seat, I don't think he's sort of publicly made his decision yet, has he?
Not as far as I'm aware, no. I mean, but I could be wrong, as I've been wrong on many matters.
No, but I don't think he has. You said yet whether that's what he's going for. And indeed, he had said he was quite happy at Westminster. So there's another. But the thing is, everyone's happy till they're not happy, So I mean, fair enough about that.
Yes.
But still, it's just, it's a very odd one.
Yeah, because everyone has the full support of the Prime Minister until they're actually sacked. That's that one there. The other thing I noted from the National, and my heart leapt, I must admit, when I saw the headline, the SNP to take action on council tax to make it better and fairer. Yeah, and then when I read it, they have got expert independent analysis commissioned, high-level analysis and modelling an alternative system and reforms of the system, call for public views, reforms to make it fairer. Any chance of scrapping it? Not a chance in hell. And Shona Robson says she's going to work with COSLA to make and COSLA say they want a better, fairer system of local taxation. So I think they're going to be a bit disappointed then, because it looks just to be tinkering with council tax and not looking. It doesn't seem to be as if it's going to be any form of analysis of alternative measures. And I'm going to repeat the usual thing here. Rather than getting independent expert analysis of the operation of council tax, deep breath, why don't they actually organise a citizens' assembly where they bring all the experts in and they present all these different aspects and perspectives of the experts and get ordinary people who actually have a vested interest in getting a proper local taxation system to work, rather than consulting them indirectly after on the administration of what decisions they're going to be taken by these experts. Why don't they actually get ordinary people in to actually make a decision based upon expert analysis? And
totally
live horse and you'll get corn, as I keep saying it. It's just extremely disappointing, Liz, isn't it? It's going to be another set of flaming analysis by experts.
Totally, and it's going to be more, long grass, etc. Different, great and the good gathered round with their own pet theories and their worries about what won't work. Obviously, lots of people want a land tax in as part of a solution for that. That was passed at the SNP conference. I was there. And I was also interviewing John Swinney about that in the run up to the general election, and it was basically no. So, it's hopeless, this, because that's just, it's not okay, this, that there's so many different, that people have poured so much energy into thoughts about different ways to run things, and then you just get a very small number of the great and good called in to be able to have a bit of clout on this. And that's not, obviously COSLA have got skin in the game and sort of experience of it, but still, that's, they don't represent, yes, you're just completely right. It's the way that you look at how you sift evidence. And, the risk, we've repeating ourselves so much with all of this, but even very complex emotive things like all the arguments around abortion in Ireland, that was fairly and calmly heard and a path found through it, which politicians couldn't see. And this is another exact example of this. There's so many vested interests in this now for just tinkering, not doing the revaluation that hasn't happened since, I think it's 1991. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But whether council tax in itself, is any kind of good measure for stuff, looking at just so much being placed on the value of homes, then all of this, it would be so powerful, just as you say, to just for once trust people to be able to sift through the arguments. But that's not going to happen. So, yes, let's not get too uncheery.
No. I mean, and fingers crossed that the experts come up with a system that's at least better than fairer than the current one. But you talked earlier about the National checking sources and sifting evidence. And I went to see September 5, which is a movie based on the real events when ABC Sports happened to be live covering the Munich Olympics when Black September took Israeli athletes hostage at the Olympic Village back in 1972. And I don't know about you, I was 20 at the time, and I recall the images, and I didn't know where they came from, of the balaclava clad Black September terrorists at the window. I noticed I used the word terrorist, and that's part of what goes on in the movie is the use of words and the decisions, whether it's a terrorist or guerrilla commando, etc. And it takes us back to that time where there was a naivety, where it was an analog versus a digital age, and news gathering at that point. It was a time of Steinbeck editing desks with all your shooting on film, editing on film, the early days of videotape, where you even got slow motion by the technician putting his finger to slow the tape running through for playback. So it's a fantastic piece. And there may be an easy but spurious analogy to be made about the taking of Israeli hostages in Gaza, but it isn't about that. It is about the nature of news, the nature of ethics, what should be shown, what should not be shown, what is the story, who defines the story, and what is truth? What is truth, and what do you go with? And it's absolutely gripping, it's absolutely thrilling, and I highly recommend it to everyone to go and see. And don't go with any preconceptions about being about Gaza. It is not. It's about the nature of news and how we have developed to where we are now, where you have a set of perspectives that can be promulgated by outlets such as Fox, which are so brazenly partisan. And this takes us back to a time with the seeds are being sown of the developments that took place, not only technically, but again, the presentation of news. And for anyone who's interested in news, it is fascinating. And it is, I say, it is a thrilling watch. I'm going to give no spoilers because you and I know the outcome. But by gum, if you're involved in it, and even though I knew the outcome, it is tense and it is brilliant filmmaking at its best.
And actually, did Trump's whole horrible Gaza thing happen since we spoke last?
Yes, it did. Yes,
I mean, it's appalling because we've now left this far too late to give this any proper thought.
Yeah.
But except just what, I mean, there's nothing left to say about it. The only thing, and I noticed today that apparently he's called in the diplomats from Jordan and basically said to them he'll cut off aid to them unless they basically jump up and offer to take all the Gaza Palestinians, which is just, it's extraordinary. But the only thing I did notice in the immediate wake of it, when you're just left kind of struggling to just what is how much pushback that's coming from within the States about it, the Americans themselves, because they are absolutely not wanting to see American troops deployed anywhere in the Middle East or anywhere actually to be trying to strong arm through something that is almost bound to fail. Because how can this possibly work? The more you try and shut down everything to do with Palestine, the more you create ingrained hatred and everything. I mean, it's not going to be something where you send a couple of battalions in and they just knock things around, take everybody out, and that's it all over. Bob's your uncle. So it looks like a lot of Americans that actually would have supported Trump are just aghast at the idea that this is what their tax dollar, let's get it right down to this, should be spent on. But still, I mean, and of course, what Trump is so adept at staying in the headlines. So I'm hearing a blooming helicopter. Is that him coming? Just adept at staying in the headlines with just here he is one day doing this, then the next, and he keeps everybody on their toes. But of course, that really is quite.
I can hear a Chinook.
Yes, it is a Chinook actually.
Yes, we were warned about this. When you were away, we were warned this was going to be happening, and who knows?
That the Chinook was going to come down and get me.
Were going to come over it. Oh yeah, they've identified. I'm next on the list here. Okay, yeah, but
they are. It is heading your way actually.
Yes.
But anyway, I mean, apologies in a way because there's too much to speak about this for us to just jam it in at the end here, and yet this is what we've done.
This is what we've done. There's a whole load to go on about it. And again, what I did was just apologies to the folks there. We got towards the hour mark and I thought, because it's so important and what has been going on, to actually jam it in at the end and to continue now for another at least 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes on this, I think would be inappropriate given the severity and the potential for the ceasefire to end because of it.
And sadly, it'll still be in the news next week. The only thing to say is when you're talking about really stunning kind of interviews, there was a tremendously good interview actually on Scottcast with Martin Geisler with Hamza Yusuf, who is still, really absolute steely fury. I mean, it's worth watching to see somebody that's just managing to stay this side of civil about the whole thing. But I mean, again, Hamza seems to, if you look on social media, the comments he's making about these things very, very heavily being retweeted because he's quite willing to go out there in a big way and be critical of pretty much everybody on this. But it was good that he was asked, and there was a long interview. But anyway, it's all sitting there. I must say, I don't know how they're keeping it up, because it's on every blinking day. I see it on the schedules late at night and think, oh, it's just too late, man. I just can't stay awake for this, But it's a good effort at giving space to those sort of big issues. So credit where credit's due.
And on that, hats off to Humza and hats off to Martin Geisler and the Scottcast team. We'll see you next week, chums.